Shalom everyone and welcome to Wisisiwe, which is Baruch in Hebrew. My name is Abigail. We continue with the series which we started a couple of weeks ago, which says Flee Babel. We've gone through the 2 or 3 teachings already under this series. Today we'll be looking at why did Abraham flee Babel. Most people know the scripture from when Yahuwah commands Abram to leave his family, which was in Haran, to the place which he would show him, but do not know how they left Ur or Ur of Chaldeans in the first place to get to Haran. So they get to the stage where Yahuwah speaks to Abram saying that leave your family, leave your household, and go to the place which I will show you. But when Yahuwah spoke to Abram those words, he was already in Haran. And when he was saying leave your family, he was referring to the family that had moved to Haran. But what most people do not know, because it's in these books yet again that have been removed from the Canaan Bibles that we have access to, which you will see in the book of Joshua and the book of Jubilee, as to what had happened, how did they come to Haran. And this is very critical, this is very important, because in us understanding the importance of fleeing Babel, the one of our forefathers, which is Abram, or at the time it was Abram, before his name was changed to Abraham, but he had to flee Babel because Chaldeans or Ur of Chaldeans was in Babel, or in the whole land, in the land of Shinar, which was the territory of Nimrod, which we've gone through it quite length as to who Nimrod is. So in today's teaching, we're going to break it down in understanding, or in get to understanding how did Abram come about to be in Haran? Why did he flee Babel? What pushed him and his family to flee? And in understanding that, we're going to be looking at 3 segments. The first part will be the birth of Abram. The second part is when Abram was in search of the true allure. What did he do to really find out who exactly is the true allure? And then the third one would be then how did Abram and Haran, how were they thrown into the fire? Most people, they also know the 3 Hebrew boys with the names that they were the names that were changed in Babylon to be Shadrach, Mashych, and Abednego, that they were thrown into fire, and Yahuwah delivered them from the fire. But they do not know that prior that actually Abram was also thrown into the fire, and he was thrown into the fire with what would I say? I think it would be called uncle. And ngesiZulu baba omkhulu. Basically, his Haran was Terach. Remember, Terach was Abram's father. So Haran was Terach's older brother. And so if Haran is Terach's older brother, so ngesiZulu sithi ubaba omkhulu, and I would guess in English it just has one word, which is uncle. But and most people, when they think of Haran, they think of the land. They don't realize that the land were normally named after people. In this case, Haran was Abram's uncle, or ngesiZulu sithi ubaba omkhulu wakhe. So this is what we're going to be looking at today, in terms of understanding what is that really pushed Abram and his family to flee Babel, to flee Chaldeans, or Ur of Chaldeans, which was under the reign or the control, dominion, rulership of Nimrod. As we start, so as I said, we're going to look at this in 3 segments. The first part that we will be looking at is the birth of Abram. How was Abram born? What was the history behind his birth? What was taking place around his birth? So we'll remember, as we touched on this in the previous teaching, that Nimrod was the first person post the flood who taught men the worship of idols. We see this in the book of Yahusha, chapter 7, verse 47, that he made the Elohim of wood and stone. He bowed down to them. He rebelled against Yahuwah, which was according to how he was named. He taught all his subjects and the people of the earth his wicked ways. Verse 41 tells us that Nimrod placed Terach, which was Abram's father. So Nimrod placed Terach as prince over his host. He dignified him and elevated him above all his princes. So we now realize from the book of Yahusha, which we don't find in the other books within the canon that we have access to, that Terach was actually one of the most senior princes of Babel, reporting directly to Nimrod, dignified and elevated above all princes by Nimrod. So you'd see that Terach was actually the what you call second in command. Yes, second in command second in command to Nimrod, second in charge to Nimrod. Now this is very critical as we narrate now the birth of Abram till the time where the entire family had to flee Babel to Haran. Now, as we're looking at this, the position that Terach, Abram's father, has of being the most senior, most elevated and dignified above all other princes, this is happening in the land of idol worship. It's happening in the land of a ruler, a king, who not only does he bow down to these other Elohim, but he also causes everyone else to do likewise. So you'd automatically see it that Terach, Abram's father, was also doing likewise. Otherwise, why would Nimrod elevate him? Why would Nimrod dignify him to be above all other princes if he was not his man, like someone who do his interest and do everything the way he wants things to be done? Basically someone that Nimrod trusted, hence he was the second in command or the second in charge. As we look at this, we're also reminded that Yahuwah specifically told us in the book of Shemoth, chapter 20, verse 4, which is from the 10 commandments that he gave us, that you do not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of that which is in the Shamayim above, of which is in the Arats beneath, which is in the Mayim under the Arats. You do not bow down to them nor serve them, for I, Yahuwah, your Alua, am a jealous Al, visiting the lawlessness of the fathers on the children to the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me, but showing kindness to thousands to those who love me and guard my commands. There was no way then that if Nimrod has already disobeyed the first commandment, which says do not have other mighty ones before my face, disobeyed the second commandment, which says that you must not have other Elohim, carved Elohim of wood, of stone, do not bow down to them. The fact that Nimrod was bowing down before these carved images that he made and causing other people to do so, there was no way that he would be obeying the remaining 8 commandments. In fact, the book of Jacob chapter 2 verse 10 to 11 tells us that if you disobey one of the commandments, you've actually disobeyed all 10, or all commandments for that matter, not necessarily 10, because Yahweh's commandment were not only 10, but any instruction that he gives you, if you disobey one, you basically have disobeyed all of them. Now, when you read the book of Jacob from chapter 2, otherwise known as James chapter 2, verse 10 to 11 says, "For whoever shall guard all the Torah and yet stumble in one point, he is guilty of all. For he who said, 'Do not commit adultery,' also said, 'Do not murder.' Now, if you do not commit adultery, but you do murder, you have become a transgressor of the Torah, or of the law, or of the command or the instruction of Yahweh." So there is no such thing that there is a balance, that I'm doing some good, some evil, and then it's gonna offset each other or balance each other. If you disobey one, you disobeyed all of them. And this was the case with Nimrod, that the fact that he already disobeyed, rebelled, in fact, not just even disobeyed, rebelled as far as the first and the second commandment, he ultimately rebelled against Yahweh's commandments. Even the previous scriptures tells us that. Now, if we look at in what is termed in the biblical canon that we have, that, as I mentioned earlier on, that some of the books were removed, books like the book of Enoch, the book of Yubal, otherwise known as Jubilee, the book of Yasha, etc. But when we read in the book of Bereshith, otherwise known as Genesis, chapter 11, from verse 1 to 11, we are just told how Babel came about, and we are told in verse 28 of we are told in verse 28 of Bereshith 11, or of Genesis 11, that Haran died in the land of his birth, which is Ur of Chaldeans. But we are not told how did he die, how did Haran die. And this is the reason why we're going through this teaching, going back before they even went to the land called Haran. How did Terah's brother, whose name was Haran, which is Abram's uncle, I guess Zulu would say Baba Mkulu, because he was older than Terah, how did he die? The book of Genesis does not give us that information. But if we read, if we then read from verse 28 to verse 32, it says that Terah and his family left Ur of Chaldeans and moved to Haran. We are also not told that why did Terah leave the Ur of Chaldeans. Bereshith, or Genesis chapter 11 from verse 28-32 tells us that they left, but it doesn't tell us why did they leave. Why did Terah and his family left Ur of Chaldeans, and why did they move to the place or the land called Haran? This information is crucial, seeing that Terah was dignified and elevated by Nimrod above all his princes. Now, if he was dignified and elevated above all his other princes, so why would he leave such status? Something must have happened to push him to leave that place of honor, that position and status of honor, to go to a place where he is not known, which was the land of Haran. Now, this account is found in the book of Yasha, otherwise known as Jasher, starting from chapter 8, which is looking at the birth of Abram, and it continues to chapter 12, when they then left Ur of Chaldeans for Canaan, but stopping in Haran. So let us now start and get this narration of what happened. Go with me to the book of Yasha. You can Google this. It is available online. Just go to Google the book of Jasher, chapter 8 from verse 1 to verse 12. And as I said before, if you download the Bible app called Sefer, which is Cepher. That version also has this book of that were removed in the Bible that we have, so you can be able to read that. Otherwise, you can just Google it, you'll find it on the internet. It reads as follows. Yahusha chapter 8 from verse 1 to verse 12. This is now talking about the birth of Abram. How was Abram born? And as we read this narration of how he was born, you'll be able to see similarities in also the birth of Yahusha HaMashiach, or Yahusha the Messiah. But let me not go ahead of myself. Let us read together the book of Yahusha, chapter 8 from verse 1 to 12 to establish how Abram was born. It was in the night that Abram was born, that all the servants of Terach and all his wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terach, and they rejoiced with him on that night. And when all the wise men and conjurers went out from the house of Terach, they lifted up their eyes toward heaven that night to look at the stars. And they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens, and he swallowed up the stars in the four sides of the heavens. Now remember what I said earlier on, that the birth of Abram is very similar to the birth of Yahusha the Messiah, in that the wise men, as they were going about at night, they saw a star that came from the east, and then they followed that star. That's how they knew that that's where Yahusha the Messiah was born. In this particular case of Abram, as I said, it is similar. They were having a meal. It says it was the night that Abram was born, that all the servants of Terach and all the wise men of Nimrod and his conjurers came and ate and drank in the house of Terach, and they rejoiced with him on that night. And when all the wise men and conjurers went out from the house of Terach, they lifted up their eyes towards heaven that night to look at the stars. And they saw, and behold, one very large star came from the east and ran in the heavens, and he swallowed up the four stars from the four sides of the heavens. And all the wise men of the king and his conjurers were astonished at the sight. And the sages understood this matter, and they knew its importance. And they said to each other, "This only betalks of the child that has been born to Terach this night, who will grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever." So already the wise men could see that as they're coming from celebrating and eating and feasting and drinking from Terach's house in the evening, as they're now going to their household, now this star that is coming from the east, swallowing all the other four stars from the four corners of the earth, it meant that this child that they were celebrating, who had been born at Terach's house, or who had been born by Terach, that he was to grow up and be fruitful and multiply and possess all the earth. So already, before even Yahuwah spoke these words to Abram, the wise men of the time, based on the sign that they saw when he was born, it was already foretelling his destiny, what will come of Abram, before even Yahuwah actually communicated it. The wise men, they were already connected in spiritually, in terms of discerning how this young man who had been born from Terach's house, or by Terach, how he would become. And it continues to say, "It possess the earth and his children forever, and he and his conjurers, his seed, will slay great kings." So he, the child that has been born, and will then will slay great kings and inherit their lands. That's they got that understanding concerning this sign of the star that they saw swallowing the other four stars. And the wise men and conjurers went home that night, and in the morning all these wise men and conjurers rose up early and assembled in an appointed house. And they spoke and said to each other, Behold, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known to him. And should this thing get known to the king in the latter days, he will say to us, Why have you concealed this matter from me? And then we shall all suffer death. Therefore now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw and the interpretation thereof, and we shall then remain clear. And they did so. And they all went to the king and bowed down to him to the ground. And they said, May the king live, may the king live. We heard that a son was born to Terah, the son of Nahor, the prince of your host. And we yesternight came to his house, and we ate and drank and rejoiced with him that night. And when your servants went out from the house of Terah to go to our respective homes to abide there for the night, we lifted up our eyes to heaven, and we saw a great star coming from the east, and the same star ran with great speed and swallowed up 4 great stars from the 4 sides of the heavens. And your servants were astonished at the sight which we saw, and we greatly terrified, and we made our judgment upon the sight, and knew by our wisdom the proper interpretation thereof, that this thing applies to this child that is born to Terah, who will grow up and multiply greatly and become powerful and kill all the kings of the earth and inherit all their lands, he and his seed forever. Now our Adon and King, behold, we have truly acquainted you with what we have seen concerning this child. So this was the birth of Abram, even as I've just read from the book of Yahusha, chapter 8, from verse 1 to 12, that after seeing this star, they said, there is no way that we can keep this information to ourselves. Let the king find out, and then he will say, why did you conceal this information from us? Because this is not an ordinary birth. This young man that has been born, he's going to grow up, and he will slay kings, great kings. He will inherit their lands, and he'll be great, and he will multiply and be fruitful and possess the land. Not only him, but him and his generation, his seed. Clearly that brought about a threat to the kingdom of Nimrod, and that's why they wanted to clear their conscience, to say, but we told you. They don't want to be in a position where Nimrod finds out this information, and then he says, why did you not tell me? So we will stop there as far as the narration, or what happened, or how was Abram born. And then we'll be looking to the next segment, and the next segment will be looking at when then Abram grew up, and then he was then searching for the true allure, the true Most High, the true Almighty. How did that come about? Because remember, he's born in the land of idol worship. Something happened to him to realize that whatever my father and everybody in the land is worshipping cannot be the Most High, because these are the works of their own hands. They've carved these idols. We can't be worshipping. They cannot be the Mighty One. We will then look at the search for the true allure by Abram in the next session.